if your life feels chaotic right now, if everything is slipping out of your hands, no matter how hard you've tried to control it, that isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you're standing at the threshold of transformation. Most of us don't lack talent. We lack meaning. We choose safety and call it destiny. We fear loneliness and call it morality. We want peace and quietly trade away our freedom. An exceptional person, in Nietzsche's sense, isn't someone famous or more moral, but someone brave enough to walk away from a borrowed life, borrowing the crowd's beliefs, the family's standards, borrowing what's labeled right to avoid the truth that they are not living their own life. In this video, we'll follow the spirit of philosophizing with a hammer, peeling back herd psychology, then rebuilding a set of values that actually belong to you. And when everything is stripped bare, we'll touch Nietzsche's most ruthless test. If this life were to repeat endlessly, would you dare to nod yes to your own life? Number 1. Renouncing a borrowed life. Most people aren't poor in will, they're poor in inner space. Nietzsche saw this clearly. People are chained not because they lack opportunities, but because they carry too much that doesn't belong to them. You can have a decent job, a full wardrobe, a relationship that looks warm from the outside, and still feel deep down like you're living in a rented house. You pay rent steadily with time, anxiety, and self-denial. Then you call that house my life. A borrowed life has an uncomfortable sign. You do a lot, but you don't know what you're living for, beyond not falling behind. You buy what you don't need to manufacture a version of yourself that others will like. You accept invitations you don't want because you're afraid of being called cold. You choose an education path or a career your family can be proud of, even though your body wakes up each morning heavy as stone. You're not lazy, yet you're always exhausted. That exhaustion doesn't come from work. It comes from acting. From ancient times, the human brain has scanned where it stands in the herd, because that position once meant survival. Social media turns that old mechanism into a handheld slot machine. One like, one glimpse of someone prettier, richer, happier, and your body tightens as if preparing for battle. You think you want that watch, that car, that title. But what you truly want is deeper, the feeling of safety under other people's gaze. Then you go home, and that recognition falls off like makeup. You're left with yourself, bare and bewildered. Nietzsche doesn't hate success. Nietzsche hates the kind of success that pulls you away from yourself, then uses trophies to cover the emptiness. It could be a young person with just enough salary, buying designer goods on installment because they fear being looked down on. They post photos at expensive cafes because they fear their life has nothing to tell. They take on extra projects because they fear being replaced. Everything looks like progress from the outside, but inside they carry a quiet question. If I stop proving myself, what's left of me? That question is the alarm bell of freedom. Nietzsche wants you to hear it because it shows you've touched the boundary between a life you create and a life someone else designed. Nietzsche once wrote in Thoughts Out of Season, "No one can build thee the bridge over which thou must cross the river of life." The first step in renouncing a borrowed life isn't running to the mountains or cutting yourself off from society. The first step is looking straight at what takes up space in your life without making you grow. You can start with objects, because objects are the most visible layer of psychology. You can open your closet and ask, does this serve who I truly am, or does it serve my fear of being judged? You can look at a chair, a bag, a shopping habit, and realize a hard truth. Many things you own are actually owning you. The philosopher Epictetus spoke of freedom as the ability not to be enslaved by what lies outside you. Nietzsche goes further. He wants you to be strong enough to choose what deserves to enter your life. An empty room can be frightening, but an empty room is also where music can echo. After objects, you need to look at your schedule. A packed schedule is often praised as productivity and discipline, but it can also be a subtle form of escape. You fill time so you don't have to hear the voice within. You run from one thing to the next so you don't have to face the question, where am I going? Nietzsche believed this is how you lose the right to rule yourself. An exceptional person needs emptiness because emptiness is where the will begins to breathe. You can take one evening with no announcements, no explanations, no pleasing anyone, and then watch guilt rise. That guilt is the chain of a borrowed life, because it reveals how used you've become to asking permission just to exist. Finally, you need to look at relationships and environments. Some people don't come to grow with you. They come to keep you in the exact position that makes them comfortable. Nietzsche isn't asking you to become an arrogant loner. He's asking you to be honest. You stay with what makes you stronger, and you leave what makes you smaller. You can try one very simple act. Refuse an invitation you don't want, and don't deliver a speech to justify yourself. You will see who respects you and who only respects your role. Number 2, removing the idols in your head. When you begin returning your borrowed life, you'll feel lighter, but you'll also feel emptier. That emptiness isn't because you lack something outside, it's because you've just moved out the invisible things that were taking up space in your mind. Yet you still hear an old voice. Don't do that. What will people think? That voice isn't yours. It's the voice of the idols in your psyche. Statues carved from fear, from the habit of obedience, from hand-me-down morality. The idols Nietzsche wants you to remove aren't only religion or society's grand monuments. They're far more subtle, because they wear the mask of rightness. They smell like morality. They dress in for the family, for the collective, for others. They make you feel good while they slowly cut away your spine. You'll see idols appear as beautiful phrases. Stay quiet to keep the peace. Don't be different. Everyone does it. Don't make a big deal. Be reasonable. These lines might be true in certain moments, but when they become your life principle, they turn you into a well-behaved copy instead of a directed human being. A social psychologist would call it normative pressure and conformity. Nietzsche calls it herd mentality in Beyond Good and Evil. Morality is the herd instinct in the individual. The herd doesn't hate you because you're bad. The herd hates you because you dare to be different. After all, your difference exposes their cowardice. You can see moral witch hunts every day. One careless sentence, one opinion outside the majority, one clipped video, and the crowd demands punishment. People speak in the name of justice, but often what they crave is the feeling of standing above. Nietzsche calls this slave morality. When the weak don't create value through inner strength, they create value by pulling others down. When you live in fear of being named and shamed, you start self-censoring. Then the idol in your head stops being a belief and becomes a switch. It turns on whenever you're about to say what you think. It turns off whenever you're about to do what you want. If you were to tap the hammer against your own mind right now, which statue would sound first? A must you've lived by for years, or a fear you've kept hidden? Write down exactly one idol that is steering you in the comments so you can see it under the light. Nietzsche doesn't advise you to become reckless. He advises you to take responsibility for your difference. Removing idols doesn't mean denying all values. It means you don't allow any value to enter your life without interrogation. This is where the hammer becomes useful. You tap the belief, "I must always be good." And you hear the crack when that belief makes you unable to set boundaries and invites exploitation. You tap the belief, "I must be kind to everyone." And you hear its hollowness when it forces you to be kind even to those who drain you. Each strike doesn't just break a statue, it releases a portion of life energy that has been locked away. You can begin with a small but sharp experiment. Choose one belief that sounds right and that you always obey. Then write the question, who benefits if I believe this? Some beliefs serve social order, but destroy the life of the individual. Nietzsche doesn't worship order at any cost. Nietzsche stands with life. He stands with what makes a human expand, grow stronger, become more real, even if the price is being misunderstood. When you remove idols from your head, a frightening moment arrives. The world suddenly goes quiet. And right then, many people want to run back to the old, because the old at least felt like a path. Nietzsche knew this moment and named it with another darkness, nihilism. When idols collapse, borrowed meaning collapses with them. You stand in the gap and ask, so what am I living for? That gap is the doorway to the next part. Because when there is no pre-issued meaning, you are forced to learn the most terrifying ability of a free human being, creating meaning for yourself. Number 3. Passing through nihilism. Don't search for meaning, train the power to create it. Nihilism often arrives in ordinary situations. You might have just quit a job you hated and feel light yet hollow. You might have stopped trying to please everyone and feel free, yet stranded. You ask, what now? And no answer comes from outside. You look back at what once pushed you forward and realize it no longer convinces you. You look ahead and see only fog. Many call this an existential crisis. Nietzsche calls it a necessary stage of rebirth because a person cannot become exceptional if they can't endure the emptiness between two versions of themselves. The danger is that nihilism easily becomes a new kind of arrogance. You start saying, life is meaningless, like a mantra, so you don't have to act. You start mocking everything because mockery makes you feel above it, while you're actually standing on dead ground. Nietzsche despises this kind of nihilism because it isn't awakening, it's surrender with makeup. It's like a drowning person who learns to sit still to save energy, then calls themselves someone who understands the sea. So the crucial part of passing through nihilism isn't thinking up a beautiful meaning. Nietzsche doesn't tell you to find meaning. He wants you to train something deeper and more real, the ability to create meaning. For him, meaning isn't a gift from heaven, not a soothing slogan, but the byproduct of a life lived through will. When you create meaning, you stop asking, what does life want from me? And start asking, what kind of person do I want to become, and what will I pay to become that person? Because Nietzsche nailed the principle with a cold, direct line. If a man knows the wherefore of his existence, then the manner of it can take care of itself. You can imagine the difference between finding and creating like this. The one who searches for meaning is like someone picking up a key someone else dropped, hoping it will open the door of their life. The one who creates meaning is like a person forging a key from hot iron. They burn their hands, sweat, fail a few times, and finally produce a key that fits their own lock. The philosopher Viktor Frankl said that a person can endure almost any how if they have a why. Nietzsche would push that statement into a harsher truth. The why doesn't fall from the sky. You must create it by living. You create your why when you dare to choose a true axis and place your life on it. It can be a project you build with your own hands, a skill you train until it becomes an identity, a promise to yourself you no longer break, a career path that reflects your character instead of your fear of judgment. You can start training the power to create meaning with an exercise. Choose one real problem in your life that you can't keep dodging, then turn it into a small work site. If your job makes life feel meaningless, you don't need to immediately find a passion. You can choose a skill that makes you respect yourself more, then train it every day. If you feel empty because no one is beside you, you don't need to rush into a new love to fill the gap. You can train the ability to be alone, set clear boundaries, and watch how the world shifts when you stop living through roles. If you feel lost about the future, you don't need prophecy. You need a 30-day plan with a small, concrete enough to measure. Here is a question that exposes every counterfeit nihilism. If no one were watching, what would you still do? The question sounds simple, but it's like a sharp blade. It cuts away borrowed motives and leaves the core. That core is rarely loud, but it lasts. Someone discovers they still write without praise. Someone discovers they still train without an audience. Someone discovers they still study without credentials. These are signs of meaning created, not meaning granted. When you begin creating meaning, the world stays the same, but you change. You no longer see your fools as proof that you're inadequate, but as material. You no longer see difficulty as punishment, but as a test of strength. You no longer use pain as an excuse to flee, but as a signal showing where you must grow. And when you go far enough, you touch what Nietzsche sees as the foundation of freedom. You stop begging life to give me meaning, and you start telling life, I will create it. From here, the next part becomes unavoidable. You must own yourself, because no one can create meaning for you if you still belong to others. At this point, if you're still here, it means some part of you is brave enough to stop living on the cheap. And the second half of the journey is where everything turns razor sharp. We'll enter owning yourself, where you must dare to set boundaries, dare to be misunderstood, dare to sign your own life instead of letting someone else sign it for you. If this part touches what you're living through, you can leave a small mark by hitting like. And if you want to take this journey all the way to the end, subscribe, so the next time your resolve weakens, this video can still find you right when you need it. Number 4, owning yourself. At this point, Nietzsche is no longer talking about smashing idols or crossing the empty gap. He speaks of something deeper, owning yourself. You don't just live for yourself, you must belong to yourself. And he drives that principle home with a single line. Whatever cannot obey itself is commanded. Such is the nature of living things. Owning yourself isn't a soft slogan like, just be yourself. Owning yourself is an act of inner violence because it cuts you loose from the invisible cords that have fed you with approval. It demands that you endure a feeling most people spend their whole lives avoiding, being misunderstood. Nietzsche believed real freedom always has a price, and that price is often temporary loneliness. People don't hate you because you're bad. They feel uneasy because you're no longer predictable. When you begin living by your own axis, you shatter the order others rely on to feel safe. You can understand owning yourself as reclaiming the right to sign your own life. Before that, you let others sign for you. Sometimes your parents, sometimes the collective, sometimes an ideal image you can't even remember who planted in your head. You still live, but you're like a sheet of paper already written on, and you're only coloring it in to look prettier. Nietzsche wants you to tear that paper. He wants you to write in your own hand, even if the handwriting is clumsy at first, even if the page looks ugly at first. Because the truth is that a genuine life is always ugly in its early stage. The way a body starts to train will ache, gasp for air, and expose a weakness you once hid behind busyness. What makes owning yourself hardest lies in something very subtle: guilt. Not guilt because you did something wrong, but guilt because you dared not to do what others wanted. You refuse a meaningless meetup, and you feel selfish. You don't take on extra after-hours work, and you feel uncommitted. You say out loud what needs to be said, and you feel not nice. This is where Nietzsche saw the machinery that trains people into obedience. Some moral systems don't teach you to grow stronger. They teach you to feel guilty whenever you draw a boundary. You can call it the virtue of sacrifice, but if sacrifice turns you bitter, exhausted, and quietly resentful, then it is no longer virtue. It is self-betrayal. Nietzsche won't comfort you. Nietzsche asks, do you want to live like a creature that only avoids pain, or like a human being who can choose pain to grow? Owning yourself is choosing the right kind of pain. You choose the short pain of being misunderstood, instead of the long pain of living a life that isn't yours. You start with small boundaries to build the strength for larger ones. You say no to an unreasonable request from a family member you've always indulged. You don't need to attack, but you do need to be decisive. You can say you disagree, and you won't do it. Then you endure the silence that follows. That silence is the moment you're lifting weights. You don't rush to fill it with excessive apologies or long explanations, because long explanations are sometimes just a way of begging for approval. You allow others to be disappointed, because you begin to understand that their disappointment won't kill you, but betraying yourself will kill you slowly. Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius teach people to master their reactions to the outer world. Nietzsche agrees with mastery, but adds a flame. He doesn't want you merely to endure life with calm composure. He wants you to become the one who shapes your own life. Owning yourself means taking responsibility for both your light and your darkness. You don't blame childhood for escaping responsibility, but you also don't deny your wounds to appear strong. You look straight at your instincts, ambition, envy, anger, and fear, and you don't let them drive. You turn them into fuel. This is where Nietzsche becomes mysterious and dangerous. He doesn't tell you to kill instinct. He tells you to tame it with will, like a rider who doesn't kill the horse for being wild, but trains the reins to travel farther. You will know you are owning yourself when you start acting, even when no one applauds. You begin choosing a path even when it comes with no social guarantee. An exceptional person keeps promises to themselves as a matter of honor, not because anyone is watching, but because they don't want to see betrayal in the mirror. Owning yourself also has a final sign, and it often scares people. You begin noticing you're no longer easily manipulated by praise or blame. You take feedback as data, not as a verdict. You begin to understand that freedom isn't a floating feeling, but a steady stance. And when you stand steady like that, the next part opens naturally. You will need something to guide this new strength, because without a compass, you will be pulled off course again. Nietzsche calls that compass wisdom, not information. Number 5. Distinguishing information from wisdom. When you begin owning yourself, you gain a new kind of strength, but that strength can easily lose its way. This is when Nietzsche shifts his focus from freedom from other people to freedom from the subtle stupidity that our age calls knowledge. You can live in an era where every answer is at your fingertips and still live like a slave to information. And an exceptional person, in Nietzsche's view, must recognize one thing: information fills you up, while wisdom deepens you. Information is something you can possess without being transformed. You read, you save, you nod along, you quote, and you remain the same person. Wisdom can't be stored in the mind like an object. Wisdom exists only when it sinks into your bones, into your habits, into the way you see life and make decisions. You can have a brain packed with knowledge, but if your life still repeats the old pattern, still fears, still depends, then that knowledge is nothing but decoration for a prison. Nietzsche is harsh toward the kind of knowing a lot that can't be lived. He looks at learned people and sees a vast library with the lights off because there's no fire inside. He attacked an education that turns humans into clerks of knowledge, memorizing without using, collecting without choosing. That sounds distant, but you can see it right on your phone. You open the feed and meet endless truths: how to live right, love right, get rich right, heal right. You watch a 30-second video and feel like you've realized something, then you keep scrolling. What you receive isn't wisdom. What you receive is a dose of dopamine labeled understanding. It feels like eating sweets when you're hungry. It satisfies for a moment, but it doesn't nourish you. Neuroscience has shown that the brain likes quick, certain rewards because quick rewards save energy. Social media and the endless content stream turn receiving information into a chain of tiny rewards. You don't need patience. You don't need experience. You don't need to pay any price. You just watch. And because you only watch, you think you've progressed. But real progress always leaves a mark. It changes your behavior. Wisdom doesn't give you the feeling, "I already know." Wisdom gives you the feeling, "I can't live the old way anymore." You can tell you're stuck in information when you keep accumulating without digesting. You listen to dozens of podcasts about discipline and still procrastinate. You memorize psychological concepts and still let emotions drag you around. If you want to live exceptionally, you can't read like someone afraid, reading to find a crutch. You must read like a warrior, reading to sharpen your weapon. You don't ask, "What should I learn so people will approve?" You ask, "What do I need to learn to become the person I'm trying to become?" In the last 7 days, has there been one thing you learned that truly changed even one small behavior? If yes, share exactly one example in the comments. If not, write the name of the one kind of content you consume the most, so you can see for yourself whether you're merely full of information or actually gaining something from it. Here, Nietzsche teaches a sharp technique. Start with yourself, not with trends. You need a root question as an axis, because without an axis, every piece of information becomes trash, no matter how good it is. You can ask the root question in a Nietzschean way. What in me is trying to grow? That question isn't romantic, it's concrete. If what in you is trying to grow is courage, you need to learn what serves courage. Communication skills, the ability to endure conflict, and decision-making under pressure. If what you are trying to grow is value creation, you need to learn what serves value creation. A professional skill, a problem-solving method, or a work system. Once the axis is clear, you choose information. In Eastern culture, people often speak of unity of knowing and doing, but Nietzsche would say it more violently. Knowledge without action becomes poison. It makes you judge life from the chair, while life only opens its door to the one who dares to step down. In the end, Nietzsche wants you to develop a taste for truth, the way an artist develops a taste for beauty. You don't pick up everything to stuff your head. You choose, you filter, you discard. You keep what makes you stronger and more real. When you do that, something strange happens. Life grows quieter, but your will grows sharper. You stop chasing the feeling of knowing a lot and begin chasing the state of living rightly. And the moment wisdom starts forming within you, the next part rises naturally, like a flame that needs wind. You will want to put your will into things, not to soothe yourself, but to shape your life. Number 6. Put your will into things, instead of praying for peace. This is where Nietzsche steps forward, no longer merely the writer of sharp phrases, but the one who ignites a life force he calls will. And what he demands is very clear. Put your will into things, instead of praying for peace. The peace Nietzsche distrusts is not the quiet of a mind after a day of honest work. He distrusts the peace purchased by numbness. That kind of peace often comes from stories told to make you less afraid. Everything will be fine. There's a reason for everything. Let time answer it. Do nothing. Fate has already decided. These lines might help you breathe for a few minutes, but if you live by them, you are signing a treaty of surrender with reality. Will in Nietzsche is often misunderstood as a desire to dominate others, but the will to power runs far deeper, because it is the capacity to shape, the power to form, the ability to turn life into a work for which you are responsible. Nietzsche stated this plainly in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Only where there is life is there also will. Not, however, will to life, but, so teach I thee, will to power. It is the force that makes a person rise when no one rescues them, discipline themselves when no one watches, and choose truth when a comfortable lie would be easier. Nietzsche does not invite you to be a tyrant. Nietzsche invites you to be the artist of your own self, and a real artist does not pray for the painting to make itself beautiful. The artist puts a hand into the color, into the composition, into every stroke, and accepts that the hands will get dirty, the eyes will grow tired, and one day the work may have to be erased and painted again. A clear example appears in money, where people most easily reveal the habit of praying for peace. When cheated out of a sum, many people hypnotize themselves with, "Let it go, it's just bad luck," to ease the pain. And then they do nothing. That may help them sleep for one night, but it also teaches their nervous system that injustice is something to swallow. A person who puts will into things does not need to become aggressive, but they will do what fits reality. Gather evidence, learn the regulations, seek advice, report to the authorities, or at the very least, rebuild a defensive system so it won't happen again. You don't need to overthrow every tradition to understand this. You only need to watch what you feel each time you want to rise. If the moment you want to become better, a voice appears saying, "Don't be greedy, don't be above others, don't make it big," then that voice is not noble morality. That voice may be the rope that keeps you at the exact level where others feel comfortable. Putting your will into things also means you stop looking for ready-made meaning in everything. Nietzsche has an observation sharp as a blade. When people don't know how to put their will into things, they assign meaning to things. They say, "The universe must be teaching me a lesson," instead of asking, "What strategy do I need to change?" They say, "Maybe I just don't have the luck for love," instead of looking at communication skills, choosing people, and setting boundaries. They say, "Maybe this is just my fate," instead of looking at financial habits, health, and discipline. Assigning meaning is sometimes a subtle form of avoidance, because it gives you the feeling of understanding while nothing has changed. A very clear way to tell whether you are praying for peace or putting will into things is to watch the language you use when problems appear. If you often say, "Why is this happening to me?" you tend toward praying for peace. If you often say, "What will I do with this?" you are putting will into things. The second sentence moves you from victim to author. Nietzsche cares about that shift more than anything, because a person can only become exceptional when they stop begging the world to be kind and begin building the capacity to stand firm in a world that is not. Putting will into things also does not mean controlling everything. Nietzsche is not naive. He knows life contains pain, loss, injustice, and limits you cannot choose. But he does not give you the right to turn limits into excuses. He gives you a harder task. Accept reality as it is, then decide who you will become within that reality. A person born into poverty cannot choose their starting line, but they can choose their attitude toward learning, choose skills, and choose how to train discipline. A person carrying psychological wounds cannot choose the past, but they can choose to heal through action, choose environments, and choose boundaries. Will does not erase pain, but will turns pain into material. And when you have put your will into life long enough, a larger question will appear on its own like a dark silhouette at the door. If life still throws at you what you did not choose, how will you respond so that you don't merely survive, but affirm life? Number 7. AMOR, FATI, and eternal recurrence. AMOR FATI is not a phrase for self-soothing. AMOR FATI is not enduring life, not forgiving it, but loving it as part of the work you are becoming. It is a discipline of the soul. It requires that you stop negotiating with reality through "if only." Each time you say "if only," you are sending your will back into the past, where it can do nothing. Each time you say, "why me?" you place yourself in the victim's position, where you wait for someone to rescue you. Nietzsche understands that life is not fair, so he does not propose fairness. He proposes something higher. Affirming life, meaning you look at both light and darkness and still say, "I accept," not because you enjoy suffering, but because you refuse to let suffering define you. Psychology has a concept that fits Nietzsche well: post-traumatic growth. Not everyone becomes stronger after a crisis, because many people are simply broken by it. The person who grows is the one who finds a new structure of meaning, a new value system, and a new strength after the old things collapse. Nietzsche does not call it therapy, but he names its essence correctly: self-overcoming. But Nietzsche does not stop at AMOR FATI. He puts a more ruthless test on the table, like a spectral mirror held up to the way you live: eternal recurrence. Imagine a demon entering your room at midnight and telling you that you will have to live this exact life again. Every detail, every mistake, every humiliation, every beautiful moment, endlessly, with no edits, no updates, no "next time I'll do it differently." How would you react? Would you scream in despair, or would you whisper, "Yes, let it be so"? Nietzsche uses this as a new moral test, a test of affirmation. If you cannot bear the idea of living your life again, that says nothing about fate. It says everything about the way you are living. It reveals that you are spending your life on things you would regret if you had to repeat them. And if you want to become exceptional, you must be brave enough to turn your life into something you can nod yes to, even if it is not perfect. You can try this test in a very concrete way. Imagine one ordinary day of your life, from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you fall asleep. Ask, if this day had to repeat forever, could you bear it? If the answer is no, you need to see what must change. AMOR FATI and eternal recurrence meet at a mysterious point. Both force you to live as if each moment were eternal. When you live like that, you begin to respect time differently. You no longer push your life into temporary mode. You no longer say later is fine to what matters. You begin asking, is this worthy of being repeated? That question filters out cheap choices. It makes you stop chewing old sorrow like gum. It doesn't make life easier, but it makes life more real. Many people misunderstand AMOR FATI as resignation. Nietzsche is not a preacher of surrender. AMOR FATI in Nietzsche is the deepest form of initiative. You actively claim this life as yours, so no one can use it as a weapon against you. When you say, "I love my fate," you reclaim the right to give meaning to what has happened. You do not deny loss, but you refuse to let loss turn you into someone who lives only half a life. You do not deny darkness, but you bring a lamp into it. If there is one thing Nietzsche wants you to carry after all those hammer taps against yourself, it is the feeling of standing upright before life without needing anyone's permission. Chaos is no longer a curse. It becomes a call. You don't need to wait until you are perfect to start living truthfully, because living truthfully is what forges steadiness. Tonight, before you sleep, try a moment of silence and imagine tomorrow as if it were to return forever. You don't need to panic at that thought. You only need to let it illuminate what you've been postponing, what you've been lying to yourself about. When you dare to change one small detail, life changes its rhythm. And when the rhythm changes, you will realize that the most frightening thing turns out to be the most liberating. You are not trapped in fate. You are being forged by fate.